House Republicans offered Democrats who weren't supporting the bill a first-class ticket to El Salvador.
Do they have those? I don't even know if that exists.
Right. Yeah.
Hi, and welcome to the Debrief. I'm Donna King, editor-in-chief of Carolina Journal. We've got everything, politics and public policy right here in North Carolina. We tell you everything that's going on with your state government. There's been a lot going on this week, so we're going to be covering a lot. Joining us here, Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation, of course, and Brianna Kramer, who's covering the state legislature for Carolina Journal. Okay, let's jump right in. Some big bills have passed the House and Senate this week. DEI, ICE cooperation, a lot going on. But plus, the North Carolina Court of Appeals this week blocked a lower court's ruling that really paves the way for State Auditor Dave Bullock to start appointing State Board of Elections members. What does this mean? Explain to me what's going on.
So remember that late last year, after Governor Josh Stein won the gubernatorial election, one of the things that the General Assembly did in Senate Bill 382, which changed a number of things in the state government structure, was they moved oversight of the State Board of Elections under the newly elected state auditor, Dave Bullock, who, like legislative leaders, is a Republican. Stein's a Democrat.
And executive branch, right?
Right, yeah. and is in the executive branch. And part of the justification for the move was that the General Assembly's been trying to change elections oversight for a number of years. Every plan that they've had has been shot down.
Right.
They said this time around, we think what we're doing is constitutional because we are moving this under another executive branch official.
Right.
And so it's not a separation of powers issue. The General Assembly's not going to control this. It's going to be an executive branch official, but it's going to be the auditor, Dave Bullock. Well, of course, then Governor Roy Cooper and Josh Stein, the current governor, went to court. Stein is continuing this case and won a ruling from a 3-judge Superior Court panel, 2-1. It was split, but the majority said, this is unconstitutional. It can't go forward. The elections appointments need to remain under Josh Stein. Well, what the State Court of Appeals did was step in and block that ruling. They issued a writ of supersedes, which is an order that basically says your order can't take effect. And so with the Court of Appeals action, that means that the law, which shifts the power to Bullock, is in effect.
Sure.
And so barring any action from the state Supreme Court, what happens is Dave Bullock gets to make new appointments, a whole new 5-member elections board, presumably, and probably rather than leaning 3-2 towards Democrats, it would lean 3-2 towards Republicans because the law says you can appoint no more than 3 members from a particular party. Doesn't say which party, but because it's been controlled by the governor in the past, it's been the governor's party. Now, since it would be controlled by an auditor who's Republican, you would assume it'd be probably 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats, which could have major impacts on how elections proceed in the future, including one would expect if this board is, in fact, able to move forward, you'd probably see a huge shake-up in terms of who actually is the staff running the elections. We know that when the board has shifted from Republican to Democrat and vice versa in the past, one of the first things that tends to happen is the director gets fired and they hire someone else who is more ideologically aligned with the majority of the board. So that would be something to watch for.
Sure. What does this mean for county boards of elections?
So it would also mean a change for county boards of elections because right now we have 5-member local elections boards that are tilted toward the governor's party. What would happen now is under this law, the state board would appoint 4 members, 2 from both parties, 2 from both major parties, to the county elections boards, and then Bullock would appoint the chair. So the auditor would have an impact on the county boards of elections too, and one would suspect you would end up with a 3-2 Republican board under a Republican auditor, with the chair likely being the appointee that Bolick would put in.
Sure. Now, this comes after some time of accusations of partisan control over the board, but this is somewhat of a partisan control of the board as well. Tell me how you think we got here in all of this, and do you think there will be people who are now happy with the way this is working out?
Well, I'm guessing the General Assembly will be happy because they're the ones who wrote that law.
Right.
The leadership and the majority party in the General Assembly.
Sure.
I'm sure the minority party's not too thrilled with it. Republicans, given the current arrangement, should probably be happy. Democrats won't be happy. But the reason that we got here is that the General Assembly has been trying to change this setup for years, and courts have shot them down. They've tried to split the board evenly.
Right.
4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. Courts shot it down. They once tried to have a 9-member board that had 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, 1 unaffiliated voter, and that was kind of skewed a little bit because the one unaffiliated voter they had was actually a longtime Democrat who had changed his registration.
Right.
But be that as it may, the courts threw that one out as well. So I think the reason that we got to this point was the General Assembly said, we don't want that 5-member board controlled by the governor's party, especially when the governor's a Democrat and we're all Republicans, meaning legislative leaders. So let's come up with a plan that's going to be able to pass constitutional muster. Putting this under another executive branch official should be able to do it. And they chose the auditor because they like the auditor. They think it has some tie-in to this thing. And of course, he's a Republican, so they'll probably get a 3-2 Republican board.
Absolutely. So what's been the response so far from the General Assembly?
Yeah, we've seen a positive response from Republican leaders, of course. Both Speaker of the House, Destin Hall, and the President of the Senate, Phil Berger, both of them sent out press releases applauding the decision. Happy. Just a couple weeks ago, they were saying they were going to fight this. And it moved forward, and now they both are applauding the decision. Berger said that this proves that the governor isn't in sole charge of the executive branch. So you have, other positions that can have more power and authority as well. And then Destin Hall said that it was a national embarrassment that we had such a partisan board playing politics.
Okay. Do you sense that this may be just the beginning, that they're going to be distributing the governor's responsibilities among other members of the executive?
That remains to be seen. They did, remember, this was a provision in the Hurricane Helene relief bill back in December. So it only passed because they had supermajorities in both the House and Senate, and now they technically don't in the House. And they were able to kind of slide this in last minute, and it did cause a lot of controversy. There was a lot of protesters and a lot happening at the General Assembly in December when they did decide to push this into a bill.
All right, we'll be watching closely.
And there are other legal fights that are along the same lines. You have the fight over shifting one of Governor Stein's Utilities Commission's appointment to Treasurer Brad Briner, another executive branch statewide elected official who's a Republican. And so that court fight is playing out. There's also a case that's at the State Court of Appeals that comes from the Cooper administration era, where there were 7 different boards and commissions, and the General Assembly shifted appointments, sometimes shifting it to another executive branch official. So this is playing out in a number of different court cases, and so we'll have to wait for a while to see how they're all resolved. I think one of the other things that is worth mentioning about this court case is one of the things that really attracted attention, and Brianna, I know, knows this because she heard Hall and Berger talking about this, but that original Superior Court ruling in this case, one of the things they seemed to indicate was that the executive power in the state is with the governor, and basically the Council of State, they're advisors to the governor. And all these Council of State members have come out and said, no, we're not. We are our own people. We don't answer to the governor. We answer to the people. And so I think however this case is resolved, there will probably be something that will push back on that notion from the Superior Court that the other members of the Council of State are just advisors under the governor.
They're individually elected.
They are. They are not accountable to the governor. If the governor issues an order, there are there are occasions when they have to comply with it, but they're ultimately answerable to the people, not to the governor. Right. It's not like his cabinet.
Sure.
The members of the cabinet, so the heads of the Department of Transportation and Department of Commerce, those are people who are answerable to the governor. Sure. They work in his cabinet and they work for him, and he can get rid of them at any time. But the Council of State, they are separate.
Right.
They are accountable to the people, to the voters, not to Stein.
That's an important point to make, of course. Can you give us an update on what's going on with the Riggs Griffin saga?
Sure, very quickly, because there's not a whole lot that's been happening this week. Monday was set as the deadline from U.S. Chief District Judge Richard Myers for all of the final legal arguments to come in this case. And so after that happened on Monday, we were kind of waiting to see if he was going to rule. But then on Wednesday, he issued an order kind of on his own, sua sponte is what is the legal term. He put out an order saying, all right, I've read all these briefs. Doesn't look like you have any real differences on the facts of this case. I think I'm going to issue summary judgment, which means a final ruling, no trial, nothing, that's just done. And I want to make sure that everyone gets all of their arguments in. So he gave them until Friday to submit any other legal arguments, any more briefs. And then after that, the plan at this point is for Myers at some point to just issue a final ruling, be done with it from his perspective, and then depending on what he rules, it might go to the Fourth Circuit, or we might get back to the trial court and then the Board of Elections if he upholds what the Supreme Court said. If that process plays out, it would eventually get back to the Board of Elections, which would have to do this cure process, but that's still a ways.
Which might be a different crowd by then.
It very well could be. And in fact, remember, one of the things that came out in the ruling from the Court of Appeals on the State Board of Elections was Josh Stein's immediate response was, hey, this is all part of them trying to steal the state Supreme Court election. Because if you have a new Board of Elections, that Board of Elections might not care as much about preserving a win for Allison Riggs.
Very interesting. All right, we're going to be following this really closely. Let us know what you think about all of this, about the State Board of Elections, about the Riggs-Griffin ongoing saga for the North Carolina Supreme Court. We want to hear from you. So make sure you comment below and let us know what you think. We're going to move on now to the state legislature, ICE, DEI, concealed carry, all kinds of things going on. Tell me what you've been tracking this week.
Yeah, where do we start?
There's
a lot happening.
It's been busy.
A couple controversial bills. We'll start there on the House side. So this week they passed a bill to ban DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives within state government agencies. So that's prohibiting the funding, hiring based on DEI, training.
Extend to education, public schools?
In the Senate, there's a different version that extends to all public universities in North Carolina. But this is more focused on public institutions in the state government. Promotion of DEI, implementation, all of that, banning any of that from taking account basically in how you're hiring maybe or leading your staff. And so it did not go without controversy though on the House floor on Wednesday. Very long debate for hours. Democrats voiced their concerns over this. And really Republicans are saying we want to go back to merit-based practices and your qualifications and not having to base some things maybe off of characteristics or quotas and things like that. So that passed partisan, no Democrats joined Republicans on that bill. The other controversial one this week is another ICE bill, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So we had a different bill at the end of last year, House Bill 10 that came through kind of cracking down on the cooperation of sheriffs in North Carolina, making them cooperate with ICE. Except there's still issues with that. And we still have a couple sheriffs in the state, predominantly in the city areas, maybe like Mecklenburg County, for example, with Sheriff Gary McFadden, where they're not working with ICE when they issue these detainers against illegal immigrants that are criminals and that are in jail, and ICE would come and pick them up. To deport them, basically.
And they've been charged with a criminal crime, not a civil, for example.
Yes, that's right. And so you have some sheriffs, they say just about 5 or so, that are just still not cooperating with ICE. So really this bill is just doubling down on their efforts from last year. And I think just adding more legal terms in
Teeth.
there.
Adding some teeth to
We
it.
meant it.
Yeah.
You know, we meant what we said
And it
last
also
time.
looks like it tightens the timeline of how long they have to notify.
Yes, the
within 2
notification
hours.
period is changed, and there's some other
Sure.
small changes, but I think they felt it was necessary with, I think, what they've seen maybe on the news and
Sure.
stuff like that to, you know, like you said,
Yeah, of course.
put some more teeth into this topic. So that one is interesting because there's one Democrat, she's from Mecklenburg County, Representative Carla Cunningham, and she
Sure.
joined Republicans in supporting this bill, which is very important when it comes to the possibility of overriding a potential governor veto. So very interesting to see that one Democrat did support this effort.
Right, that is interesting because one of the things that we found was like a defining characteristic of the Cooper administration was this constant parade of vetoes. Do you think Stein will follow suit? Because it feels like on these two topics, there's a cultural trend that maybe, Democrats aren't on the right side of history, or at least what public opinion is on things like DEI or cooperation with ICE.
It's going to be very interesting to see what the governor's plan is on vetoes because Roy Cooper did have a record number of vetoes for North Carolina governors, and there was a very strong contrast during the times when the General Assembly had veto-proof supermajorities, the Republican leadership, versus the times when they didn't. When they had the veto-proof supermajorities, they almost always overrode every veto. When they didn't have supermajorities, they didn't override a single veto.
Right.
He went for 4 years and had every veto sustained. And part of that was because Roy Cooper and the Democratic Party team were very tough on anyone who had voted for this bill the first time and said, don't vote with, we'll primary you. If
They kept a really tight line on that.
Yeah. Now, in fairness to the Democrats, most of them were going to vote against it anyway, but there were a handful of them who said, they originally voted for the bill and would likely vote for it again, but the Cooper team kept a real strong leash on veto override votes. So it'll be interesting to see what Josh Stein does because once again, the Senate has a Republican veto-proof supermajority. The House does not.
Right.
They're one vote short. So if this particular bill comes to pass, as Brianna was just talking about, Carla Cunningham would probably be the deciding vote. Would she vote with the Republicans for this bill, or would she vote with her party and not have to face the heartburn of having to deal with criticism from fellow Democrats?
Sure. I mean, she seems to have a pretty stable seat right there in Mecklenburg County as a Democrat. But it is notable that she's the one that voted with the Republicans on it, and she's the one that has Gary McFadden in her district. So, her seat might be safe, but it's got to be a difficult position that she's put in.
Yeah, that is a difficult position for her, but very interesting that Gary McFadden is right there in the Charlotte area, and so is she. So she's not afraid to go against her own party when it comes to an issue like this. And she was talking about the crime rates in Charlotte and explaining her positioning on that when she was explaining why she's voting with Republicans on the House floor.
Very interesting.
But also of note, House Republicans offered Democrats who weren't supporting the bill a first-class ticket to El Salvador.
Do they have those? I don't even know if that exists.
To visit the prisons and live stream their trip.
So was that a condition they had to live stream if they were going to take them up on the
that's
first?
a condition, and post it on social media for everybody to see that.
I hope somebody does it. I would love to see that. That might be, maybe that's where we need to go.
That's right. Well, that one passed the House. Obviously, those two bills now go to the Senate.
Okay.
A couple other ones passing the House: state investments in digital assets.
Okay.
That's now through the House, and then healthcare reforms. Lots of healthcare reforms in the House and Senate this week. So the House passed the Care First Act, House Bill 434, and that's to streamline this prior authorization mess.
Oh gosh, yes.
Which is,
that would be
I think, a difficult thing in North Carolina, prior authorization, working with your doctor and the patient, and then all the fine details and requirements of waiting and the delays. So they're trying to, I think, crack down on some of these really drug out processes. And so they passed that through, and the Senate did a similar bill just about a month ago. So they're trying to really address health care and the high costs in North Carolina.
It is so expensive. Now, tell me a little bit about the work requirements for Medicaid. What was that?
Yeah, so that passed the Senate. That is Senate Bill 403, Medicaid work requirements. It passed with some bipartisan support as well.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
And that's really to set up North Carolina for work requirement laws if Medicaid were to change in the federal government. And that's just really saying that North Carolina would be willing to enforce work requirements for recipients of Medicaid in the state. So really this is amid ongoing concerns of federal cuts and funding, because our agreement with the federal government is 90-10.
90-10, right? Yeah, it is. It is. But if it changes, if it changes at all, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Medicaid expansion goes away, right?
That's what the current law says. Now, I don't think anyone expects that it actually would, since you have, 500,000-600,000 people on Medicaid. But the law as it stands now says if the 90-10 match ends, then Medicaid expansion ends. And so they would have to take some sort of step. And I think Brianna is getting at one of the pieces that they're talking about, that if they continued Medicaid expansion at that lower reimbursement rate, that there would have to be something like a work requirement or something else to put in place, and not just have all of those people on the rolls with no work and the state picking up a much larger piece of the bill.
Sure. All right, we're going to be watching all of these really closely. Please let us know what you think. We've covered a lot today, and I want to hear what you think. Continue this conversation. Thanks for joining us on the Debrief, and we'll see you next week. Did you learn something? Make sure you subscribe to Carolina Journal's YouTube channel and watch the Debrief every week, where we're going to be breaking down everything happening in your state government. And check out carolinajournal.com for the latest breaking news.